The following Zoom session is being recorded and will appear later today on my YouTube channel, Math with Mayo. There are two different classes that may be observing this session. Therefore, when you participate in the Zoom meeting, if you do not wish for your picture or your name to be made public, please leave the video off and use an alias name. If you have questions during the meeting but do not wish to speak, email me at bmail@yvcc.edu and I'll respond as soon as I can. All right, so today we're going to review for the Chapter 10 test. Just a reminder, there's no class tomorrow, Veterans Day. And then on Friday, there will be no class meeting. You will just take the test and you can take it anytime up until Friday night at 11:59 p.m. So I had one request from a student to do a problem. So we'll take a look at that. This is from section 10.4, part 2, problem number 14. It says determine the coordinates of the vertex of the graph of the function using the vertex formula. Then determine the x and y intercepts of the graph. If an answer does not exist, write capital D N E. All right, and the function is f of x equals 4x squared minus 28x plus 49. So we have what? A is 4, B is negative 28, and C is 49. To find the vertex, we're going to first find the axis of symmetry, which will be the x value of the vertex. So we're going to use x equals negative b over 2a, which is negative times negative 28 over 2 times 4, which is what? 28 over 8, which reduces down to 7/2. Then we're going to find f of 7/2, which is, let's see here, f of 7/2 would be 4 times 7/2 the quantity squared minus 28 times 7/2 plus 49, which is 4 times 49 fourths minus, let's see here, 28 over 2 is 14 over 1, and 14 times 7 is, that's 98, and then plus 49. So then the 4 and the 4 reduces here. We have 49 minus 98 plus 49, which is 0. So all of this tells us the vertex is at, what was it here? 7/2, comma, 0. Now, to find x-intercepts, we would set y equal to 0. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this function and go on to the next page because I'm going to need a lot of room to write with. So f of x equals 4x squared minus 28x plus 49. So to find the x-intercept or intercept, we'll set y equal to 0. And again, we have a is 4. B is negative 28 and C is 49. So x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So x equals 28 plus or minus the square root of, let's see here, if we take negative 28 times negative 28, we get 784. And then we've got, let's see, negative 4 times 4 is negative 16 times 49 is minus 784 all over 8. So x equals 28 plus or minus the square root of 0 over 8. X equals 28 plus or minus 0 over 8. So x equals 28 over 8, which reduces down to 7/2. Okay, so The x-intercept is at 7/2, comma 0. Okay, now to find the y-intercept, you would set x equal to 0, and f of 0 is 4 times 0 squared minus 28 times 0 plus 49, which is 49. So the y-intercept is at 0, 49. So x-intercept 7/2, 0, y-intercept 0, 49, and the vertex was at 7/2, 0. All right, so I want to go back for a moment and take a look at the student's work. Just to speak to the student, you know who you are. So it looks to me like you found the right numbers, but when you went to label things, instead of putting in zeros, you put in other values. So just be really careful with that and how you deal with that. Okay, so now let's go back to the whiteboard screen. Do any of you currently present have any questions you'd like for me to go over?
No.
Number 16, I remember.
Number 16.
I think
Okay.
it was a word problem.
All right, hang on
Either-
just a minute. Let me find it. Okay, let's see.
I got it right, but it just took me some time to figure it out.
Sure, sure. Okay, what section was it from?
The same one.
So 10.4 part 2,
Yeah, it
and
was like towards the last one of the last few questions.
okay, let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and show the screen. So
Although the card 17.
this one here,
Yeah,
17.
yeah.
Okay, let's take a look at that. Let's see. Let's do this. Okay, so it says, suppose you are a police patrol officer and you have 308-foot long roll of yellow do not cross barricade tape to seal off an automobile accident as shown in the illustration. What dimension should you use to seal off the maximum rectangular area around the collision? Okay, so let's go back to the whiteboard. Here's what we know. We're going to build a rectangle, okay, because it says it was a rectangular barricade, okay? And the total perimeter is 308 feet, okay? We want to maximize the area of this rectangle that has a perimeter of 308 feet. Now, there's a couple of different ways we can do this. I'm going to do it a certain way, and if you follow it, I'll continue, and if you don't, I'll go back and do it a different way. But if the whole thing is 308 feet, so all 4 sides, would you agree that 2 sides would be 154 feet? In other words, half of it.
Yeah.
Okay, if I cut it in half. So that means I have, a second here. I have 2 sides, the total of which is 154 feet, okay? Let's say I call this side X. So this little piece here is going to be X. If the whole thing is 154, and I take away the X, the piece that's left would be 154 minus X. Do you follow that? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So now area is length times width. Area, and I'm going to write it as a function, is going to be 154 minus X times X. Okay. Area is length times width. Still with me?
Mhm.
Okay. So A of X is 154X minus X squared. A of X is negative X squared plus 154X. I'm just putting it in standard form. So negative X squared plus 154X. So that's the function that describes the area as it relates to X. Now, it's said to find the dimensions and the maximum area. So I need to find X. The parabola would open downwards because the leading coefficient is negative, okay? The vertex would consist of an X, A of X ordered pair, where the input would be this length or width here, and the output would be the maximum area. So basically I'm looking for the vertex, okay? So A is -1 and B is 154. X equals negative B over 2A, negative 154 over 2 times -1. Negative divided by negative is positive, and 154 divided by 2 is 77. Okay, so X is 77. 154 minus X would be 77. So the dimensions are 77 feet by 77 feet. Okay, now the maximum area, we could find it two different ways. We could just take the length times the width. Let's do that. Let's see, we get 77 times 77, which is, so max area is 5,929 square feet. Yeah. Or we could find the Y value of the vertex, that is the A of X value, and so plug A of 77 into this, okay? And I'm gonna have to go to another screen to write that. Let's see, A of X equals negative X squared plus 154X. And we wanna find A of 77, which would be, and when we do that, we still get 5,929 square feet. You okay with that, Gabriel?
Yeah, it's just like did it, but it just took a lot of guessing on how to solve it.
Okay, and this is another one of those problems I talked about yesterday where the directions are kind of confusing because it says shorter side, longer side, but in fact they are the same. So I really wish they would just, instead of saying shorter side, longer side, maybe one side, the other side kind of thing. But anyway, all right. Anything else you want to look at?
No, that's it.
Anybody else there want to look at anything?
No.
Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just kind of highlight some main points from this chapter. 10.1. Second here. We had the square root property. That said that if we had an equation, let's say, for instance, x squared minus 24 equals 0. If we had a second degree equation, and if we could do the following, if we could put a perfect square on one side and a constant on the other. So for instance, here, I'm going to add 24 to both sides. You get x squared equals 24. So I have a perfect square on the left, which contains a variable, and a constant on the right. Then I could come in and take the square root of both sides. But when I do that, I do a plus or minus on the side that has the constant. And I can simplify this into 2 square roots of 6. So then I get x is 2 square roots of 6, comma, negative 2 square roots of 6. When you list your answers, make sure that this comma gets moved outside of the radical, because if you write it like this, WebAssign won't recognize it and it'll mark it wrong. So be careful that that comma gets moved to the outside. Okay, then we went on to section 10.2 and we had the quadratic formula, which you should have memorized. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. There's a wonderful song that you could use to memorize it. It goes like this: negative b plus or minus the square root plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, all over 2a. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, keep your day job. All right. Anyway, quadratic formula is that. We use that on second degree equations. And so we take a quadratic equation and we put it in standard form. Let's say we've got this one. 3x squared equals 12x minus 4. So we would put it in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. All right, so I'm going to subtract 12x and add 4 to both sides. Subtract 12x and add 4 to both sides. 3x squared minus 12x plus 4 equals 0. If we have decimals, we can multiply both sides by a 10 or 100 or 1,000, whatever it takes to clear the decimals. If we have fractions, we can multiply both sides by the least common denominator to clear the fractions. If we have, if the numbers are all large and seem to have a common factor, sometimes we can divide out, like if everything's even, divide everything by 2. And then we identify A, B, and C and plug them in. Negative B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC all over 2A. X is 12 plus or minus the square root of 144 minus, let's see, that's 48 all over 6. X is 12 plus or minus the square root of 96 all over 6. And let's see, 96 is 4 times, what is that? 4 times 24. In fact, that'd be what? 4 times 4 times 6. So 16 times 6. And what I'm doing is finding the largest square. So I'm going to go back here and I'm going to do this. I'm going to say 96 is 16 times 6, which would be 4 square roots of 6. In other words, the square root of 96 is the square root of 16 times 6 is 4 times the square root of 6. So now I've got x is 12 plus or minus 4 square roots of 6 over 6. Everything's even, so I could reduce this down. X is 12 over 6 plus or minus 4 square roots of 6 over 6. So x is what? 2 plus or minus 2 square roots of 6 over 3. Okay. And so then I could split that up and I'd have x equals 2 plus, what was it? 2 square roots of 6 over 3. X equals 2 minus 2 square roots of 6 over 3. Plug those into the calculator, round to the nearest 10th. You should get 3.63 and 0.37. Is there any part of that problem that you would like me to go over again or slower or with more explanation? That was just kind of a quick review of how you use the quadratic formula. Okay. Don't forget, let's see. Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. You use that when you're given a right triangle and you're given a relationship between the sides and you plug it into the Pythagorean theorem. And then from there, you end up usually solving a second degree equation. Section 10.4. We had y equals a times x minus h squared plus k. If a is greater than 0, we get a parabola opening upwards. If a is less than 0, we get a parabola opening downwards. The vertex is either at the bottom when it opens up or at the top when it opens down. The axis of symmetry is an equation, x equals h. If you just put the h value in, it's going to be wrong. You've got to write x equals. The vertex is at HK. When you go to graph it in WebAssign, in fact, let me, what you've got to do, you've got to click on that dot over on, or that square on the left side until it turns blue. And then you must plot the vertex first, and then one other point, and that should form the parabola. Go over to the right side and click on the menu there to make sure that your ordered pairs are the correct things that you put in. If you put in something other than the vertex first, it's going to give you a parabola that's going to be upside down. It's going to be wrong. So be careful with all of that. Then the second part was y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. The same thing about a. If a is greater than 0, the parabola opens upwards. If a is less than 0, the parabola opens downwards. The axis of symmetry is at x equals negative b over 2a. Again, it's an equation. X equals a number, and the vertex is at negative b over 2a. So whatever that value is, and then you plug that back into the function. So you get f of negative b over 2a. Again, find the vertex, plot the vertex, and then a second point. So regardless of which form you use to get the vertex and the second point in WebAssign on the graph, you have to graph the vertex first. So you've got this equation or formula, this formula, this formula, this formula, and whoops, let's see, up one more. And that formula. Okay. So you want to have those formulas memorized. Any other questions, things you want me to talk about, specifically examples, anything? All righty. Well, then I will see you all next week, unless you come to my office hour today. But again, no classes or office hour tomorrow. No class Friday. You just take your test. I will be back this afternoon at 1:15. Should you have any last minute questions. Other than that, I will stop the recording